Welcome to Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure. I'm Rob Wilson.
And I'm Tony DeQuano.
So, today we're going to be doing the next installment of the Indiana Jones series. We are on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
The fourth installment, right?
Yes, that is the fourth installment of the series. We got one more after this one, and then no more Indy.
No more Indy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting enough because, I never thought that fourth one might be made. And then eventually they decided, we'll make a fifth one.
Yeah. Yeah, and then...
almost 20 years between Crusade and Skull, and then like another 15 between the next two.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, and I'm sure they're not going to make another one, at least not with Harrison Ford. Which, if it's not with Harrison Ford, it's not going to be good, because Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones.
He is Indiana Jones.
So, I mean, somebody else could, I'm sure they would put in a valiant effort, but it'd be like, Billy D. Williams and Lando Calrissian,
Yes.
I mean, Donald Glover did a great job as a young Lando. Did a fantastic job as a young Lando, but...
He did.
Billy D. Williams is Lando. It's like Harrison Ford is Han Solo.
I think it gets especially tricky when you do a lot of those younger, the younger versions of iconic characters. It very rarely, it can work well enough, but it's still, especially when it becomes so ingrained in the pop culture, it almost becomes a mimic in a way.
Yeah.
It's hard to fully create that younger version of a character, as opposed to, say, something like, Godfather Part 2, where now you have like a younger Vito Corleone being played by De Niro, but it's not as ingrained at that point. It works differently, but
that was also cutting back and forth in time in that movie.
It was.
So it was present day and flashbacks. So it kind of it worked a little bit differently than if it was just like a full on prequel or something.
Correct. The only thing I could see truly working would be waiting like 60 years. And then you kind of bring it back, and then even then it would be different, but it'd be enough time passed for some people. It'd be enough, kind of in a way, how they redid Robin Hood and Zorro, all these famous ones in the 30s, right?
Yeah.
And even then, it's still a little bit different than, while some of, Costner, Banderas might have their appeal, they never quite stuck the same way as even the original characters were.
Yeah.
So... especially when, for like Indy, it's an original creation.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, say, Batman, where you can have different iterations and respect kind of the different actors that portray them. You could prefer Christian Bale, or you could prefer Adam West.
Yeah. But at the same time, you can still appreciate what the other actors have brought to it.
Exactly.
So. But... probably one of the biggest names that's been thrown around about playing a younger Indiana Jones has been Chris Pratt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that he couldn't do a role like that, but it would be a lot like Solo.
Yes.
With Alden Ehrenreich playing a young Han Solo, where he did a great job with within his abilities, but he's not Harrison Ford. It's not going to be the same.
I think with Chris Pratt too, you would need to kind of keep a level of within the movie itself, kind of being self-aware of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
He plays a certain vibe really well, and I think you could bring that to a younger Indy like that, but like you said, still not going to be the same because Harrison Ford created the character.
Yeah.
We've discussed that enough. So. But
although it would be interesting to see, like an alternate reality version where it was Tom Selleck.
Yes.
Like if Magnum PI hadn't created a schedule conflict. If Tom Selleck was
maybe you do that with the Chris Pratt one, and somehow like Tom Selleck's in there somehow. That's anyway. Now, anyway, Tom Selleck would probably sell it really well, too. So,
yeah.
I'm sure he'd love to get back to the Magnum PI. But it's funny, though, because that was kind of the talk when this came out. Will someone else continue the mantle? And it's kind of set up in a way that could potentially happen. And it didn't happen, obviously.
Yeah, it didn't happen, thankfully.
Thankfully.
because of the Shia LaBeouf of it all.
And like, I was thinking about, like, would Shia LaBeouf kind of become, as well, again, we haven't seen the movie. We will be discussing spoilers.
Yes, we will.
So.
Spoiler alert. We will be talking about the entire movie, beginning, middle, and end, and everything in between. So if you have not seen the movie, you don't want to be spoiled, then pause the podcast, watch the movie, and then come back and listen to our delightful discussion about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. If you don't mind spoilers, then keep listening, and hopefully we can entertain you.
That's right. But that was the rumor with him, right? Like, leading up to the movie when he got cast. Like, oh, would he take up the mantle of Indiana Jones? And people were already speculating, is he going to be Indy's son? And then, 2/3 of the movie, it's kind of telegraphed throughout most of the movie that, yes, he's his son. And
yeah.
Especially when Karen Allen pops up halfway through the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But, so.
Playing his mom.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that was a legitimate discussion at the time. Like, just at that time, he was Transformers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought, and like that would be bad. It's kind of funny though, because like I don't think he was as terrible as I remembered him being in this.
Yeah. Same here. I mean, I never thought that he was terrible in this movie, but after rewatching it, after however many years it's been since I watched it before, he was noticeably better than I remembered him being in it.
Some of it is just the way the character is written. It's very stereotypical character.
Yes.
But yeah, he's not horrible, but I still don't think he would be the one that could have carried the actual Indiana Jones movie anymore.
No.
So. No,
he could not have carried the franchise after Harrison Ford would leave.
But obviously now he's not going to be Indiana Jones in the future. So maybe no one else says, as far as we know. So what I remember, aside from that, though, was as we discussed, I think, I did, I saw Crusade in theaters, and
mm-hmm.
but it is, the first one that could lead into kind of a certain expectation.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the time, I was cautiously optimistic, I guess.
Yeah.
So at the time, our number three, he and his buddies owned an old movie theater, and he said, come over on opening night, we'll watch it. Up in the, we got the little balcony up there, it'll just be the two of us, and, we'll go to this bar beforehand, right? So I met him, and we went to the bar. It's a biker bar, and we got really, really lit, and then we proceeded to watch Crystal Skull.
Nice.
And I heard, it's a good movie. And so this is my fourth time watching it, right? This most recent, the second time was after, I got it on DVD. Put in what did I just watch? This was not what I watched with Steve. And then the third time I watched it.
You weren't drunk this time.
I don't recall the third time I watched it.
The third time we watched it was when we watched it together when we were going through all the movies.
That's right. And so this was my fourth time. And I have a lot of different opinions now. And so I'll be interested to see kind of how you counted it this time. So,
I first saw it in the theater. It wasn't opening day, but it was within opening week somewhere in there. But it was, my brother-in-law was buddies with one of the managers at the movie theater. And so he would let us into the movies for free a lot. And it was awesome. And that was one of the ones that we saw. So I didn't have to pay any money for it the first time I saw it. Which, I mean, I was just like you, I was cautiously optimistic going into it. It was, one of those 20-year later sequels that they waited a couple decades to make. And those rarely ever turn out good. But I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was. And I think the more I've seen it since then, because I've seen it several times since then. I don't know exactly how many times, but I watch it every, couple of years or so. When I was watching all the movies for the podcast, actually, that one I watched, all of them I watched probably at least twice for this, for recording this stuff. And that one I think I might have seen 3 or 4 times just recently, since we decided to do the indie movies. But every time that I watch it, I like it a little bit more. So I never hated it as much as most people seem to loathe it, It's kind of like the Star Wars prequels and sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
I enjoy all of them. It's Star Wars,
Right.
Just like this. I love Indiana Jones movies. No matter how bad it is, it's still an Indiana Jones movie. It still scratches that itch.
Right. I think for me, enough time was kind of separated to be, all right,
Yeah.
Like I can kind of evaluate it on its own. And the thing I found watching this time, at least, was that it does feel like it's an Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah, it does.
It really hits a lot of the beats that you're familiar with an Indiana Jones movie. And so, I can appreciate that with it. And I can appreciate some of the set pieces of it. There's other aspects maybe I don't like as much. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But it does feel like an Indiana Jones movie.
That's exactly what I was just about to get into. It's no matter how you feel about all CGI or the overuse of it or underuse of it, if you think it's underused, even though it's pretty overused.
There's probably someone out there's like,
any problems you might have with the writing or with the acting or anything. At the bottom of it all, it's still a solid Indiana Jones adventure.
Yes.
There are some very key bad moments in the movie. Yes, we're not discounting that. But strip it down to its bare bones, it is a solid Indiana Jones adventure. And that's what I love about it.
You have the clue hunting. You have some chase scenes, right? You got some creepy crawlers. You got claustrophobic type moments. There's an adventure to it. There's a bunch of faceless bad guys, right? So, it does have that feel, and maybe it plays up a little bit too much at times, kind of the feel of some of it. And even some of the characters are kind of copies of other characters in a way.
Yeah.
So,
it is,
which I think in some ways ends up being kind of one of the weaknesses of it, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Because it can't quite live up to those other characters.
But even though it is, in my opinion, the worst of the Indiana Jones movies, that's including Dial of Destiny, for those of you who may not like that one. I actually enjoyed that one quite a bit. But yeah.
I have heard that it is, overall, I've heard it is better than Crystal Skull.
I like that one better than Crystal Skull. But just because Crystal Skull is my least favorite Indiana Jones movie does not mean I don't enjoy it. Yeah.
There's enjoyable aspects of it.
It's still, I still really enjoy the movie. All the stuff that we just said about it is why I love it. And it's Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
So it scratches that indie itch.
I guess, the thing I can appreciate too, I guess, is, and it does jump that 20 years. It's, now the late 50s, right?
1957, I believe.
think sounds about right. And it's kind of different because, like, all the other ones, 57, yes. Kind of the opening part of it involves Indy, but there's kind of a whole kind of credits type sequence, right? With, these teenagers or college students just driving a car in the Nevada desert.
Yep.
Playing 50s music, right? And then there's some government-looking people driving alongside them, right?
And they drag race.
And, but okay. I don't know if that's the way I would start it, but it is what it is. And
let's back it up a little bit to so the classic mountain, the Paramount mountain. Beginning of every Indiana Jones movie so far. It sadly did not appear in Dial of Destiny because that was a Disney production, not a Paramount production. But the Paramount logo would always shift into an actual rock formation or something.
Yeah, like a rock.
Or in the case of Temple of Doom, it was the design on the gong.
The gong. Yeah. But it was supposed to be a mountain there in the Himalaya somewhere.
This one's a prairie dog mound.
And again, and this is where it gets like why are we adding in these unnecessary? This is why I say it leans too much into being too campy. It's like, okay, let's just throw in CGI animals.
Yeah,
for no reason.
For no reason.
Anyway,
it's like there are plenty of mountains, rock formations. I'm sure there are some sort of rock formations that resemble the Paramount logo somewhere in the Nevada desert.
Yeah.
Why do they have to do a prairie dog
Mesa or something? No.
I don't know.
And then you just get these boppers from the 50s just joyriding in the middle of the desert. Where do they come from?
Yeah.
I get where the military guys came from because, again, it's the 1950s in the desert. Like, it makes sense that the U.S. military had these bases in the middle of nowhere, so stupid boppers that want to just randomly drag race in the middle of the desert don't happen to see top secret test.
Yeah. And, we find out fairly quickly that the military vehicles are going to a base that turns out to be Area 51.
Correct.
So, like how did these kids, how were they able to get so close?
No.
I get that it probably didn't have all the restrictions that it has now, as far as,
Yeah, there's a lot more technology now to easily detect a lot sooner when people are approaching. But, like, you start getting close to the perimeter.
Mm-hmm. They drove right past the entrance.
they start looking at you.
Yeah. They drove right past the gate.
Yeah. It's not the most secure gate, too. And, like, again, this is one of my other little quibbles with the movie, right? And talking about how this is supposed to be a test that's going to be there. They're not going to let them through. And what is it, general or admiral that's there? And it ends up they're all obviously not Americans, and they kill all the guards, right?
Yeah.
And that's a little quibble I have with it. It's like, I don't know. Like, there's not a lot of innocent death in the indie movies.
No, there's not.
And there is that in this one.
Yeah.
And I have a little bit of a problem with that.
Yeah, you're right. I never really thought about that. How the other ones, there's not really a whole lot of innocent death, but this one they just gunned down the American soldiers there. Huh.
So anyway, and then we soon find out that they have Indy prisoner.
Yep, in the trunk of the car.
In the trunk of the car. So Indy, I guess he was involved with the opening scene.
Yeah.
But not in the way that
he was just riding in the back of the car in the trunk when the soldiers were racing the kids.
And it does kind of seg into like a classic in the opening type of chase type of scene.
Yes. and we have we're introduced to Mac, Indy's on again off again spy partner from the war. That this is our first introduction to him.
Yes.
Kind of like...
Played by Ray Winstone.
Yes, played by Ray Winstone.
Of Sexy Beast fame. If you've never seen Sexy Beast, I recommend it. Just to watch Ben Kingsley be awesome in it.
I have not seen Sexy Beast.
Anyway.
But yeah, it's kind of like at the beginning of Temple of Doom, when Indy's got the guy there that has traveled with him and has been on many great adventures with him, but we don't know about those adventures.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think it works better for Temple of Doom. We're trying to piece together this past before these movies, as opposed to trying to piece together all these things that have happened in between the movies.
I agree.
And there's other characters there's new characters that will be introduced later where that happens too. And I can accept it with Shia LaBeouf because he's this unknown son that he has. He's never met him. Mm-hmm. He's a new character to him too, right? But yeah, it's hard to kind of understand and fully, I guess, embrace kind of this kind of new backstory to Indy that we have no idea about.
Yeah.
So, they make references to these things that have happened. But
yeah, and see, that's
kind of have to make it up in your mind.
That's where, I don't want to spoil too much for Dial of Destiny right now because we haven't done that movie yet. That's the next one. But it's kind of like one of the things I like about that movie is it actually has some flashbacks to fill in some of those gaps.
Right.
But that's all I'll say about that movie for now until we come back for the next episode.
Yes.
But yeah, so you got Indy and Mac. And then we meet Irina Spalko, played by Cate Blanchett, So I think Cate Blanchett is too good for this role.
She is too good for this role, and she butchers it.
Yeah. So, she does a halfway decent Russian accent, or Eastern European accent, really, because she's not Russian. Right. Except any time she says Dr. Jones, which is like every 2 minutes in the movie.
Yeah.
She loses the accent.
Like, if you want a fun drinking game, just take a shot at any time. She says,
yes.
Dr. Jones.
She has this Eastern European accent the whole time, except when she says Dr. Jones. Then she cuts back into her British, or I guess she's Australian, isn't she?
Yeah.
So her Australian accent. Dr. Jones. Yeah.
It's funny because then, her breakout role was as a Brit and Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And she played an elf in Fellowship, and I loved her as Galadriel. She's a terrific actress, but
she's a fantastic actress.
I don't like her here.
Yeah, they really could have
her look
picked somebody
is wrong.
else.
She's too stiff, and I don't know. Like, she's just so. There's a fun aspect to. And, each of the movies kind of has multiple villains, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even in Temple of Doom, like Mola Ram doesn't show up until like halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
Right. And like what Raiders, like there's not really one Nazi, there's all of them. And then you got Belloc, right? And then Last Crusade, again, there's just a bunch of different Nazis trying to get them, right? So here, now you don't have the Nazis because it's the late 50s, so now it's the commies, which is fine. I like that, they went ahead and played into the theme of the time. There's no problem with that. But she's almost overdone, and there's...
Yeah, I mean, they really...
Her hair looks bad, her costume looks bad, and there's nothing inspired about her. She's just... Maybe they just wanted her to be like a robotic commie, but like the other guys are Germans. Like they're robotic Germans.
You don't put somebody with, who's as high of a caliber of actor as Cate Blanchett into a role like that.
And I think that's the thing that was mentioned too. Is that the other ones, villains, right? Is they were like character actors playing these guys, right? And now you have a prestige actress because she'd won her first Oscar at this point for The Aviator, and she's been nominated several other times. She's a well-respected actress put in this genre blockbuster.
It's clear that she was seemingly put in the role just to sell tickets. People see her name in it, and they're going to go and see the movie because she's in it. And then...
they're taking this movie seriously.
Yeah. Then you have this disappointing character that she plays. I mean,
anyway, we can get more into that. But yeah, she's disappointing. It's like, maybe part of it's because she is such a great actress, and they could have.
They need to give her a role where she can shine.
Maybe part of it is like, like none of the other villains are like that deep, but they play it well enough, right? And again, her character doesn't need to be deep here, but
it should be more than a one-note villain role. She deserves more than to play a one-note villain.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway,
and unfortunately, it doesn't help that there's other villains that are in this. Obviously, we'll get into that. But the other Russians that are in there just disappear in the background. They're all just like red shirts. As opposed to the other movies where you have kind of 2 or 3 different villains that you're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
Here it's just her, and as we'll find out towards the end of the scene, Mac is a traitor.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not nearly as interesting as well. We'll get into that very shortly.
And again, Ray Winstone, great actor, in a role that he probably shouldn't have been cast in. Although he does a good job with it. But
he does.
He
gives an effort. I'm not going to deny that.
Yeah, no, he does. He gives a good effort. It's just the role doesn't have much meat to it.
Yeah. He reminds me in a lot of ways, and maybe part of this is because of the ending of the movie, Benny from The Mummy.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
But there, if you get someone that's kind of a character, like Ray Winston is a character actor, right? I get that. But he's just kind of a classically trained guy. Give someone that's kind of like knows comedic beats well. Like he's the comedic relief in this movie. For most of it, right? And it doesn't work. So, again, there's a spoiler, right? He's a double agent and then a triple agent, but not really a triple agent. We'll get into that.
Yeah, he kind of... tries to be an omni agent, I guess would be what it'd be called. Just playing for all sides.
But so anyway, they get him out of there, right? And they're in this hangar, and they want Indy to find a specific crate. And they tell him about the details of it.
Yeah, so
he knows it's magnetic.
Yeah, he knows this crate is magnetic because there was a crash in the 40s. In the desert. And
again, this gets into, like, there's this backstory stuff that we don't know a whole lot about.
Yeah. So this crate is supposed to contain something from that crash. And all Indy knows at this point, well, I mean, he knows more than he's letting on, but all that is revealed to the viewer is that the contents of the crate are magnetic. So, Indy convinces them to give him shotgun shells and the gunpowder from their grenades and all that so that they can follow the trail of the metal to where the crate is. But if it's that magnetic, like to where he could just toss up all the buckshot and everything up into the air and then it just pulls it, why isn't everything else that's metal in the whole facility getting sucked toward it?
Someone has to have a belt buckle.
Plus, they're all carrying guns, metal guns. There are metal lights all in there that don't start moving until they start moving the crate by them. But if it's that magnetic to where all he has to do is toss up the hat full of gunpowder and buckshot, then it would pull every bit of metal in that whole facility.
Not to mention, this facility is massive.
Yes.
This is the only magnetic crate in the entire facility.
Yeah. Which, we've already established that this facility is Area 51.
And I just okay, and if it is that magnetic, you could put the magnetic box into something else to damper the magnetism.
Yeah, so they get to the crate, they open it up. It's a casket inside the crate with something wrapped up inside it that is shaped very much like your stereotypical alien.
Yes.
It's revealed that they're looking for the body of an alien that was in a spaceship crash in the 40s.
Okay.
So Indy is able to sort of distract them a bit and try to escape.
Was this before they found the crate, when they were doing the trail? Is that when you discover, the Ark is within there, or is that
that's after? That's during his escape.
That's during the chase.
That's during the chase because he ends up getting knocked into a crate and a piece of it breaks, and then you see the Ark of the Covenant in that crate.
Yeah, correct. You got it. Yeah.
Which then confirms that at the end of Raiders, the Ark was being put in Area 51.
Yeah.
It wasn't just some random warehouse.
No.
So, you get one of the few scenes where Indy actually uses his whip in the whole movie. When he attaches it to one of the lights and tries to swing onto the back of a truck, but doesn't swing far enough. The truck's moving too fast, so he ends up falling back into the windshield of the truck that was following.
Yep.
So yeah, he escapes Area 51 and ends up in a little neighborhood.
He gets shot out of the rocket tube.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, he goes onto the rocket car on the tracks with
fellow Russian.
Yes.
Well, we discover first. This is when before that we discover Mac is the
Dovchenko is that guy's name. So we discover that Mac is a double agent and
is they're both kind of cornered.
He's a traitor
and Mac points his gun at Indian.
Yeah.
He has gambling debts. It's always gambling debts.
It's always gambling debts. But yeah, so Indy ends up fighting with Dovchenko on the rocket sled, and it gets activated, and they go flying through the desert. It comes to a stop. Dovchenko is unconscious, and Indy sort of limps away.
I'm going to say this because you're segging into this little small town, right? Which a lot of people have a problem with, right? But that followed that scene.
Yeah. So he's in this small little quintessential 50s town. He was running into one of the houses looking for a phone. Howdy Doody's playing it on the TV.
Looks like the family is watching it.
And he discovers the family that's watching
out
it
in the yard
is a bunch of dummies. Not like dumb people, but just dummies. Mannequins.
Remember what we said earlier when the Russians initially proceeded to the gate of Area 51? They talked about there being a test.
Yes, they did. And it turns out that it was the test of a hydrogen bomb. The siren goes off, and there's a countdown just as the Russians are coming to try to find Indy. And once the countdown starts, then they leave. And he tries to run after him to get a ride with him out of there, but they don't stop. And so one of the most controversial parts of the movie comes up next, which I get it. A lot of people hate it. I'm not a fan of it either. But there are worse parts of this movie. Let's face it. There are worse parts of this movie. This is not the worst part of the movie. It's bad. It's definitely bad. but it's not the worst part of the movie.
It's kind of bad in like an amusing way, at least.
Yeah, so Indy's running around trying to find some way to escape the blast. Notices that the refrigerator is lead lined. So he pulls everything out of it, climbs in, bomb goes off.
Like, okay, it's a fake town. Why do they have a lead lined refrigerator in the first place?
Why fully furnish the houses if it's just going to be a bunch of mannequins in them? Especially putting things in the fridge. Why is there stuff in the fridge? So
anyway, he closes the door just in time.
Yeah, closes the door just in time. Bomb goes off, kills the Russians that were driving away. The explosion, the shockwave catches up to them, and
Russians.
Kills the commies. Just the ones in that one car. The rest that are still at Area 51 are at a safe distance. But then the fridge that Indy is in goes hurtling through the air and tumbling across the ground until it comes to a stop, opens up, and Indy comes rolling out.
Okay. So I gotta think in some ways this was a slight nod to Back to the Future, which Spielberg was a producer on.
It has to be. Because as we discussed in that episode, Back to the Future, the time machine the original idea was a fridge. It's going to be a refrigerator.
They didn't want kids locking themselves in the fridge.
Exactly. So they changed it to a car.
Which makes you wonder, like, how is this fridge opening in the first place? But also, I kind of want to know, like, the thing I kind of have a problem with is, like, there's other houses there in this town. Mm-hmm. The bridge is the only thing that hurtled through the air.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's an excellent point. Yeah, all the mannequins were just vaporized. Maybe the fridge was the only thing with any lead in it. Because just a little bit of lead lining is going to protect it from a nuclear blast.
Which, it's funny. So, like, nuking the bridge, it's never really... People thought, okay, that might replace jumping the shark, right? Mm-hmm. It never really has.
Never did, yep. But yeah, so... It launches him far enough to be in the safe zone.
Yeah. You see the mushroom cloud.
It launches him miles. Miles away.
If he's not dead by, the blast, he should be dead from internal injury.
Yes. That thing hit the ground hard. And then it tumbled. It bounced.
Like, okay, so externally he should be fine, but like his internal organs would have ruptured.
Yeah, there's no way he's surviving that. But he's Indy, so he's surviving.
Whatever. There's always a stretch of disbelief with the Indy movies. That one does go a bit further.
Yeah.
It's funny. I can kind of live with it.
I mean, and then you get the CGI prairie dog. Again. Might be the same one, might be a different one. I don't know. But yeah, you get more CGI prairie dogs. And why? But yeah, so then we have Indy. He's been picked up by the U.S. government. He's getting a radiation shower, cleaning him off and getting scrubbed with the big old brushes on broomsticks. And then we get Neil Flynn.
Yes. I love he was in the movie.
I love Neil Flynn.
And he's perfect. He's perfect for this.
He is perfect for this role. Oh, I love Neil Flynn. Neil Flynn is awesome.
Like, he hits the tone just right. Like, the overly serious 50s Fed guy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they think Indy might be, double agent too. Because of Mac, right? And all that. So, if you've never watched Scrubs...
The janitor is...
Watch Scrubs.
Oh, yeah.
Also watch
Janitor's one of the best characters.
Anything with Neil Flynn. Even The Fugitive.
Yes, even The Fugitive. He's in that too.
You should watch. So...
Neil Flynn does not get the credit that he deserves.
He's great. He's hilarious. He's a good actor. And Yeah, I was again, like I forgot he was actually in this movie.
Yeah. So he's questioning Indy, and then Alan Dale comes in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like, oh, that's right, I forgot he's in this too.
Yes, it's General Ross, who was in the war with Indy, and basically just comes in and vouches for him. You know, tells Neil Flynn to get off his case and, you know, believe anything that Indy tells him.
Yep. So, and then it goes back to kind of again, like, this is probably a longer opening sequence, I guess, overall. You know, Indy back at his college, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's teaching the class, and at this point,
he doesn't seem to have. Yeah, he doesn't seem to have as many girls that are like trying to flirt with him.
Which is weird because, like, you know, they say like guys age better, and like Harrison Ford's always kind of had that appeal.
Yeah.
Right. Like.
Yeah.
You would think that they might be interested, but no, maybe they just no longer find his archaeology as intriguing. I don't know, but anyway. So, yeah, the classic scene is, you know, the class ends. At this point, Denholm Elliott has passed, so Marcus Brody has also passed. So you have Jim Broadbent.
Yeah.
Right? I love Jim Broadbent. Yeah. And again, he could be perfect.
He's great.
But again, it's not the right thing because you have a new character and it's supposed to accept all this backstory, but you can't.
It's this new character that's replacing Marcus Brody. Because, like you said, Denholm Elliott was not with us anymore, so he couldn't have reprised his role. And so, yeah, you have this new dean that clearly has some history with Indy, but we don't know what it is. They don't really go into any explanation of what it is. Just that he's the one that took over being dean after Marcus died.
Yep. And again, it's, you know, it could be fine. After this scene, you don't really see Jim Broadbent again. It's Jim Broadbent. Jim Broadbent's a great actor.
Yeah, he is. They have a lot of great actors in this movie. Underutilized great actors in this movie. And it's sad that all this great talent it wasn't given the opportunity to show what they can do.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, he approaches, you know, Indy and is saying that, you know, the college has been approached by the FBI, and the FBI has been pushing on the college, and they revoke Indy's tenureship. Or, you know, he's put on leave of absence, I guess, is actually what happened. But what's Broadbent's character's name? Dean Stanforth.
Yes. Dean Charles Stanforth.
Ends up resigning over it. Right? Yeah. You know, he tried, you know, it's like, oh, why? That's how he protested. It was he resigned. He didn't, you know,
he resigned so that Indy could keep his job. So Indy then he gets on a train. Well, actually, no. First up, yeah, because Stanforth was telling him about this at Indy's house.
Yes.
And we learn that between Last Crusade and Crystal Skull, Henry Jones Sr. has passed away.
Sean Connery was still alive at this point.
Sean Connery was still alive at this point, but he did not want to return for the movie.
They approached him. They offered him a chance to have a kind of a small role in it, and he declined, which, you know.
At this point, he had retired from acting because of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Which another movie that I enjoyed probably more than most people did. Still not a great movie, but I still enjoyed it more than most people did. But yeah, so that was the movie that caused him to retire from acting. And so because of that, he chose not to return for Crystal Skull.
That's fine.
So they killed off his character off screen.
Which makes sense because, you know, it's 20 years later. And
yeah. And he wasn't a young man in
60 something at that. And
he wasn't a young man in the 30s. Oh, by the way, for anyone wondering how Henry Jones Sr. died, if he drank from the Grail, he should be immortal. We went over this in the Last Crusade episode, but I'll repeat it again. Once Elsa took the cup over the seal, all bets were off.
Yep.
The powers of the Grail no longer applied. The knight specifically said that if the Grail crosses the seal, then that's the cost of immortality.
Yep.
The Grail must stay within the confines of that temple.
Yeah, say confines. That was what I was going to use. Yeah, you have to be stuck somewhere, which is fine. He was fine with it. So he gave him the little salute at the end. No, and I don't think he blamed Indy. He knew who Elsa was, so.
Mm-hmm. He was probably just sitting up there watching the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing better to do.
This is the most I've seen in 800 years.
I've been alone for 800 years.
So, yeah, but I'm glad you brought up the house because, like, that's, again, kind of the classic part of the formula, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go back to the house.
Before the adventure, they're always in Indy's house, except Temple of Doom.
Yes. But Temple of Doom is slightly different anyway.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Temple of Doom doesn't take place in America at all.
No. It's all really China and India.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe briefly in Nepal, you know, they fly over Nepal, but whatever. So, you know, Indy gets on a train. Where's he going on the train?
You know, I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either. Anyway.
He's getting on a train, and this kid, Shia LaBeouf, in a leather jacket, this greaser
riding
kid.
down a train platform on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And no one's like, hey, you can't do that.
No.
This is the 50s. They were a lot more strict about that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's there looking for Indy because his friend disappeared. His mentor disappeared.
And so, more as a friendly mentor, you know, yeah. Huxley.
Yes, Professor Oxley.
Right?
Ox, who we later found out is played by the amazing John Hurt. Again, fantastic actor in a movie that did not fully utilize his skills.
Yeah. Again, it's funny, like the really classically trained people, they all gave super kind of very comedic tones too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're ragging on this movie a lot, but again, just because it's the worst of the Indiana Jones movies, in our opinion, does not mean that we hate it, or at least doesn't mean that I hate it. I really enjoyed it, but we are just putting a spotlight on some of the worst parts of the movie, the worst things about it. So, just because you can't really talk about it without talking about these things,
they're talking on the platform. Indy's on the train. This greaser is on a motorcycle.
Introduces himself as Mutt Williams.
Yes. And just kind of talking. And then what does he end up saying that gets him to get off the train?
I think he mentions Ox.
It's just Ox. That's right. This is when he mentions Ox. And he gets off the train. And they go into one of the, you know, like a classic 50s kind of
diner. The kind of place that you would expect Marty McFly to show up in the background or something.
Right. Yes. You know, and again, like I think they kind of maybe overdo some of the 50 stuff. Okay, whatever, that's fine. But he's talking about Ox and finding this crystal skull in Peru. Go through this kind of backstory of Ox and him and Skull, you know, and
then Indy gives a little bit of backstory about crystal skulls. Talks about the Mitchell Hedges skull a little bit, and
No,
your info dump.
He knows his thing, and right. Your info dump, your exposition, and what he mentions some Spaniards going to try to find this city of gold.
Yeah, Akator.
Down there,
or
they never
El Dorado.
returned. Yeah.
So then,
he knows that Ox was always kind of an expert on all of this.
Yeah, and Ox has disappeared, and so.
Which again, it's kind of like it's kind of like Last Crusade, where Henry Jones Jr., the expert on the Grail, disappeared.
Oh, Henry Jones Sr.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry.
Henry Jones Jr. is Indy. But yeah, same thing. The expert on it disappeared, and so Indy sort of makes it his mission to go and find him. He's not necessarily looking for the object so much as he's looking for Ox. Just like in Last Crusade, he was looking for his dad.
It's into another thing where Ox is this person who has this deep history with that goes back to the original trilogy, not just between the movies.
Now, I had heard somewhere that the original plan for it wasn't going to be Ox; it was going to be Abner Ravenwood.
That would make more sense.
Marion's father, who there's an established relationship there, because there's a lot of talk about Abner in Raiders.
Right. And she says Abner is dead, right? You know, so it's just another character that there's even more history with that's all new all of a sudden. It was Ravenwood. Like, I kind of like that twist in the lens that somehow he was actually alive. But then they go that route.
Yeah, so they notice some government guys in the diner. And so they stage a fight, or they start a fight.
They start a fight, yeah.
Yeah, they start a fight and get out of there. Then you have the little motorcycle chase.
Yeah.
That ends up going onto Marshall College campus. And they're driving through the library. And you have... I mean, it's an exciting sequence. You know, they're going through the streets and going across campus. Then they get in the library. And you get quite possibly the worst use of a Wilhelm scream that has ever been done.
Yes.
You have a nerdy kid standing in the middle of their path,
just between the two stacks of books,
and they're riding the motorcycle straight toward him, and he just lets out a Wilhelm. And it's sad that such a great sound effect is wasted on that, especially when there's so many other points in this movie where it could be used to much better effect.
There's other parts of this movie where there are great drops to your death that people experience.
Yeah.
Where they could just put in a Wilhelm. Like, no. Some kid dives out of the way in a library.
Yeah.
Here's the Wilhelm!
And then also that kid being in their way causes them to swerve the bike and slide across under tables while everybody else is stepping out of the way, jumping out of the way so that they can slide past.
It's just so noticeable, too, because, it does actually have an effect on the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they make it out of the library, and they're riding across campus, and they're being chased, and there's a statue of Marcus Brody in the quad. And
which is nice.
Yeah,
he's supposed to be this bumbling person, but he was respected enough
that they made a statue of
him.
But during the chase, the head gets knocked off of the statue. So, Indy and Mutt escape, and they head for South America to look for Ox. And it's revealed that Mutt's mom has been pushing him to go to college. And Indy tells him, well, what do you want to do? He's like, I want to fix motorcycles. Now, don't be telling me that I need to go to school. And Indy's like, no. If that's what you love doing, that's what you should do. Don't ever let anybody tell you different. And I only mention that because it comes back into play later. So it's
interesting. You can tell Indy recognizes, he's a smart kid.
Yeah.
It's the way he's describing the things with Hux and everything. Anyway.
So they find the monastery / mental institution where Ox was being held.
Yes.
And they find his room, and he's carved all this stuff in the walls, in the floors. And they find a map on the floor. Or not so much a map, but an overhead view of a burial site in Peru.
Yep.
So they go there. It's an old Mayan burial ground.
They kind of piece together that's probably where the grave might be.
Yeah. Because there's clues written. He carved clues into the walls, and it mentions the Nazca lines, and so they're the lines that only gods can see. And Indy,
and
pieces together.
This is where it gets to be like the good Indy stuff.
Yeah,
where he's able to understand these different clues, or he knows enough about kind of these digs and sites and cultures that he pieces these things together to understand what's happening. This is like classic Indiana Jones right here, where okay, you get really invested in this stuff.
It's like with this, it's like I'm in. This is interesting. I'm gonna watch, and then they get to their burial site, and there's native ninjas,
right,
in there.
Which I'm okay with that. Whatever.
I mean, they got their.
I'm fine with these dangers at these sites. Again, this
is indie.
Is good indie stuff.
This is good indie stuff. But yeah, so
you get ninjas. You got badass people in fezzes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's the sad thing about this movie was there are no fezzes.
You got the kids.
You know what? The even number indie movies don't have fezzes. Temple of Doom and Crystal Skull, not a fez to be found. But the other three, they've got at least one fez.
Fez. The fez is one of my favorite hats. I ask for a fez for Christmas.
Yes, fez is a great hat. The 11th Doctor would be proud. But yeah, so no fezzes. But yeah, so they fight off the natives that are protecting the burial ground. Indy scares them away with his revolver after blowing into the business end of a blowgun to blow the dart back into the guy's throat, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, no, that seems. And that's where it's funny though, and this is the part I kind of like is and they play this well with the Mutt characters. Like, oh wow, like in these shacks, they're still showing some moves.
Yeah,
and
at this point, Indy's what, in his 50s?
Yeah,
or so,
maybe 60, like 50. Yeah, so
yeah, he's still able to move around and fight these people who clearly have fighting skills.
Yeah, they're probably young warriors. Right? They don't see a lot of white people.
Yeah.
But they're obviously protecting something that's sacred to them.
Yeah.
So
they go in one of the tombs. They see paintings on the walls, hieroglyphics and stuff like that of people with elongated skulls.
Yeah. They talk about how like they were taught them how to farm and kind of build cities and civilizations,
and
right?
Basically explain that, this could have been the reason why
knowledge.
Native Peruvians used to bind their children's heads to make them longer.
Yeah.
And
if you kind of think about the classic gray face type of alien, they kind of have a particular shape, right?
Yeah.
And again, like all that stuff's like, oh yeah, like that's kind of very Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
It's not, well, and it's funny, like, again, at this point, you had the odd numbers or biblical artifacts, and then like the even numbers were non-biblical, right?
Yeah.
You have the Shakara stones and now crystal skulls. So, it's fine. It's all well and good.
Yeah, so they discover that this is the grave of Oriana. So it was, right?
Yep. Yes.
Who was searching for Akator or El Dorado. And they find his grave, or they find where he's sort of mummified. And he's been mummified with a crystal skull.
Mm-hmm.
It was clearly removed before because his wrappings were cut open. And then it was returned. So they know that it's legit because it is magnetic to even metals that aren't magnetic. Because there's gold coins that are sticking to it. And gold's not magnetic.
Right. Which begs the question about the scene in Area 51.
Yeah. So anyway, so they take the skull. And as they're leaving the grave site, the Russians are waiting for them.
Because of course.
Yeah. So the Russians take them back to their camp, set up the skull so that they can force Indy to stare into its eyes and tell them where Akator is.
Right.
Because that's what Ox did, and it drove him crazy.
Yeah. It has telepathic abilities. So obviously they weren't going to be the ones to kind of connect with it, right?
Yeah. And so this is, of course, where we find Marion. Marion shows up at the camp.
Good old Karen Allen.
Yeah. And we learn that she is Mutt's mother. And we meet Ox. We meet John Hurt, Professor Oxley.
And he's, at this point, he seems like his brain's been kind of fried from basically all the kind of contact with the skull.
Yeah. And, we learn that he's the one that had found it at the grave, and then he's the one that returned it because it told him to return.
Yeah. And because he's a man of integrity, he's not all about the fortune and glory, so to speak, right?
Yeah. So they get Indy, they threaten him to get him to, or they threaten Marion, and so that's what gets him to stare into the eyes of the skull. And it talks to him. We don't know exactly what it says to him, but it telepathically speaks to him. Doesn't drive him crazy.
But, it's very brief. So,
but then, so he then makes it his mission to return the crystal skull to Akator, because that's what it told him to do. And so we get into at
this point, too, Ox still wants to return to Akator, too. He hasn't been able to do it yet because he's been captured. And so he tries to communicate how to do it through writing because he can't really communicate any other way yet.
Yeah. So they escape the camp and they go running.
Well, they have a little fight first.
Yeah, they have a little fight. And they escape, and Indy and Marion end up in quicksand. And they're sinking in the quicksand. And this is where it's revealed that Indy is Mutt's father.
Yep.
And so then that's when he goes back on what he was telling him earlier about follow your dreams. If that's what you love doing, don't let anybody tell you different. And
he needs to finish school.
Yeah, starts telling him he needs to finish school. But so they're sinking in the sand. And so the most recent time that I watched it, because I had this question for the longest time. So Mutt throws a snake out there for them to use as a rope to pull them out of the sand. And so Marion gets pulled out, and then he throws it out to Indy, and Indy, it's a snake, so they just had to throw a snake in there, because there were no mention of snakes before, but it always has to have, Indy's got to show his fear of snakes.
Yeah, And
so
obviously it needs to be a way to save his life.
Yeah, so he keeps telling him to tell him to grab the rope instead of grab the snake. But I always wondered, why doesn't Indy just throw him his whip and have him pull him out with the whip?
I've always wondered that.
And so the most recent time that I watched it, I paid more attention to where Indy usually keeps his whip on his belt. And his whip's not there because the Russians took it. That's why he does not use the whip. So that answers that question. But there's also plenty of vines and everything in that jungle that he could have used instead of a snake.
Freaking jungle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just going to take this snake, not poisonous. It still might bite me.
Yeah.
It's just, and unfortunately, it's like, again, like you have this nice middle section, and then this, you have a section here now where it starts to kind of get nuts again, unfortunately. It's just like, it's too tongue-in-cheek, it's too cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
It's, like I said, vines, there's probably plenty of tree branches, right?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of, this movie kind of falls into the trap that the Roger Moore Bond movies fell into.
Yes.
It gets too campy.
Yeah.
I mean, still good movies,
campy.
still enjoyable to watch, but a little too much camp.
As they realize they're in trouble, Ox is there, and they tell Ox to go get help. Ox runs off, and then after Indy gets out, the Russians are there, and he just says, "Help!"
Mm-hmm.
It's the Russians with guns.
Yep.
And so they kind of, obviously at this point they have to figure out, okay, they got to find Akator still. Then it leads off to another chase again, right?
Yep, the classic Indy car chase.
And there are
with the trucks and the duck vehicles and all that going through the jungle. Where
obviously you still need the strife between Mary and Indy. I'm fine with that. Chemistry between Karen Al and Harrison Ford is still top notch.
Yes. Oh, and we didn't mention earlier that Mutt mentioned that he did great in fencing when he was in school.
Oh yes, that will play.
Because
a terrible way.
Yeah. Yeah. So during this chase he gets into a sword fight with Spalko, and
because they're the prisoners in the back of a truck,
mm-hmm.
and then they escape, and then that produces a chase.
So
there are several
fighting for the.
There are three things that happen here that are definitely worse than the fridge.
Yeah, the skull changes hands a few times, and then they're sword fighting across vehicles, and Mutt gets knocked off the back of one of the trucks. And then comes one of the parts that's worse than the fridge. In order to catch up with the convoy, he swings on vines through the jungle with a bunch of CGI monkeys.
But what's weird about it is he lands like in a tree on the vine, and he sees a monkey and he stares at it. And it's like they communicate telepathically.
Yeah.
Somehow. And they all swing together through the jungle.
Yeah.
Like, who thought up this scene?
Yeah. So that sequence there, the whole swinging through the jungle part, is worse than nuking the fridge, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's not even close.
At least the fridge part had some logic to it. No matter how thin, it had some logic to it. Because it was a lead-lined fridge, at least. But swinging through the jungle with monkeys, with CGI monkeys, keeping up with those monkeys.
At least, swinging in just swing vines by themselves. Okay, that makes sense. He has to, avoid some animals. Okay, that kind of makes sense.
But he's also swinging fast enough to catch up to the convoy.
Right. I get swinging on a vine can cover a distance, but, you're probably not going as fast as someone that can even run.
And it doesn't stop with CGI monkeys. He catches up to the convoy.
Oh, no.
Indy is fighting Dovchenko again. This time there's no rocket sled, but there's a giant anthill. And there's giant...
And at first it's just an ant. She's pointing a gun at him.
Yes. And an ant crawls up on Spalko's hand. It's a giant ant. Giant CGI ant. And it bites her. She knocks it off her hand. But then there's just a swarm of ants coming up. A swarm of CGI giant ants that... Are there actually ants that big? Please, if there's an entomologist listening to this, Are there actually ants this big in the world?
There are giant ants, right? And they can swarm, right? But like this ant was like looked like it was the size of from her wrist up to her first knuckle.
Yeah.
That's how big it looks.
It's a giant ant. Please, if there are any entomologists listening to this, or just somebody that loves ants, are there actually ants that big in the world?
And then what gets worse is like they start chasing the rest of the people that are there in vehicles, and they almost seem intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah, so...
going after certain things, and...
Indy's fighting Dochenko. Ants are swarming around him, but they won't go near the crystal skull.
No.
And Indy's got the skull, so they're not coming near him, so they can fight. Indy ends up punching Dochenko, knocks him into the pile of ants, like into the swarm. And they carry him into their anthill. They drag him underground.
They even go in his mouth. You ever seen the Matrix where, where everything goes
into the mirror? He touches the mirror and it goes down his throat, and the camera follows. The ants do that with Dochenko.
And then
I haven't decided what is worse, the CGI monkeys or the CGI ants. I keep going back and forth on which one's worse. But they're both worse than the fridge.
Once they drag him in the anthill, like they're done with the swarm. They ate another random Nazi.
Yeah.
Not Nazi, not another random
commie.
That didn't stop them.
Yeah.
But this did. And during this, all of this during this, by the way, is when Matt...
Yes, I was just about to say that.
...goes, Indy!
Yeah.
And then reveals...
just like Berlin.
That he's actually... CIA still.
Yeah, and he's actually a triple
infiltrated the Soviet.
Yeah.
So
he's triple crossing them.
But again, like we haven't mentioned him in a while because he doesn't do much within the middle of the movie. He becomes more important now. And again, like it's kind of like, okay, he's supposed to be comedic relief, kind of Sulla-ish, but Sulla never pretended to be anyway.
And I mean, a bunch of the vehicles that they're driving through in this convoy are duck craft. They're amphibious jeeps, basically. Yes. So they pull up in one of those, and he gets in there, and they're driving away. But not before his hat starts getting carried to the anthill with the ants.
They leave the hat.
Yeah.
Because they know Indy needs the hat.
Yeah.
I guess the skull communicated.
Yeah.
With them.
Yeah, that they need to leave Indy's hat. So the ants leave it, and then he picks it up.
Yeah. I don't know. The ants or the monkeys, I really...
I go back and forth. On which one's worse. But they're both worse than the fridge.
I might have to vote the ants.
I mean, the ants are in it longer. The monkeys are only in it for like a minute. The ants are actually they have a major sequence.
An actual set piece. Like the ants switch the scene. Like it's the end of the scene that sort of transitions it.
Yeah.
And like they just love how his legs go down.
Yeah.
They cover him. They go into him.
Yeah.
Like it's got to kill the ones that just decide to crawl down his esophagus.
Yeah. So they're in the duck craft. They go into the river.
Yes.
Into the Amazon River, and part of the clues to Akator is it drops 3 times. There are three drops. So they notice that they're going toward a waterfall, and they fall down the waterfall, and then they all somehow stayed in the vehicle.
I mean, Temple of Doom.
Yeah. And then they think they're safe.
Float it down a life raft.
And then there's another waterfall. They fall down that one. Somehow they all stay in the vehicle. And then they think they're safe. And then, oh look, another waterfall, because it said it drops 3 times. And this is a big one.
Didn't he have a way that he went there that didn't involve going down 3 waterfalls?
Yeah. So I forgot to say this. So in order how they got into the river was Marion, who was driving, drove off a cliff, landed on a tree that was sticking out of the side of the cliff.
That's right.
And it gently lowered them down into the water.
We so dately. You're about to go down waterfalls. So we'll dately put you into the river.
So this third waterfall is bigger than the other two. They go over the edge, and then you see them all, as they're falling, they fall out of the vehicle. Somehow they all survive.
Which I'm fine with them surviving.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's a movie.
Again,
it's
Temple of Doom. They used a life raft to jump out of the airplane.
Yeah.
They slid down a hill, down a mountain, off a cliff, into a river, and that went off a waterfall.
Yeah.
And they all survived. So, okay, I'll grant them that one. Which is kind of the thing I liked about Crusade and Raiders is like, he gets beat up a bunch, but like everything gets beat up. We're like, okay, yeah, he can survive that.
Yeah. So they make their way. They find more of the clues on the path to Akator. They get to Akator. They get to El Dorado, but it's not gold. It's not the city of gold, like the legends have said it is. It's not a city made of gold. There's no gold anywhere except just, what might be, decorative pieces.
Right.
And then Indy reveals that the word for gold can also mean treasure or knowledge.
Right.
So they determine that it's, returning the skull will give knowledge, the greatest treasure of all.
Corny, but okay.
Yeah. So they make it into the chamber. Yeah, I know I'm skipping a lot of, what they're doing, like the traps and stuff that they go through, which aren't really traps all that much. It's more puzzles. So they solve some puzzles. So they solve some puzzles in classic indie fashion, which is great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. They solve puzzles to raise that pillar that splits apart and all that and opens up the entrance to Akator, and it's awesome. Awesome indie stuff. But yeah, so they make it to the chamber with all of the alien skeletons.
Well, even before that, like we see that like there's some natives that are kind of tracking them a little bit.
There's some natives that are tracking them.
And like, okay, whatever, that makes sense. And like, I don't know how being that isolated hundreds of years they maintained the population, but anyway, it's fine. It adds to something. Well, it should add to something. It doesn't. And then you see Mac drop a tracker, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay,
Mac's
been for the Soviets.
Mac's been laying breadcrumbs.
So
Hansel and Gretel style.
But they get into that like chamber, like you said, and they see all.
And we learn that they're not aliens; it's interdimensional beings. They're not from another planet; they're from another dimension.
Right, which is like I'm fine with. Read a lot of people that really get into UFO literature, and maybe some of you are. That's a classic theory that aliens are not from other planets, but from other dimensions.
Yeah,
I'm actually kind of cool with that theory.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And I mean, the whole thing with, a big complaint about this movie is he's going after, it's got aliens, it's got interdimensional beings.
Right. Well,
it's
I'm
not.
glad you're bringing this up.
It's not the holy artifacts that he was chasing in the original trilogy.
Well, the skull itself was recently holy to those natives.
Exactly.
Because they treat them like gods.
Exactly. It is somewhat a holy relic that he's going after, and it's really. Yes, it's a lot more sci-fi than the other movies have been so far.
Right.
But at the same time, Raiders was very sci-fi for what it was.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not the same kind of sci-fi, but...
No, I would agree with that. I think that Last Crusade probably treats Segura far more of kind of within how it might really be viewed. But then, maybe it's probably the wrong way of saying it, but ties it much closer into kind of religion, just being this thing that might heal, as opposed to kind of how they present the Ark, which seemed very, very different than kind of the biblical representation of the Ark, right?
Yeah, I mean they had to make it Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean it's a terrific scene. I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's one in that chamber. There's one skeleton that is missing a head. And so they return the skull to that skeleton. Well, Spalko returns the skull to that skeleton. And because
the Russian,
because
they caught up to them by this point. And they murdered all the natives that were...
Yeah. They murdered all the natives that were following them, and then forcibly took the skull from Indy and Ox. And yeah, so Spalko puts the crystal skull back on the headless skeleton. And all of the other skeletons all sort of morph together. They all get sucked into this one.
Kind of like this big centrifuge just keeps spinning around, and they all morph into one.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense within the theory, like, the whole telepathic thing,
Yeah. Which then here comes another bit of classic indie movie.
Yes.
Where the death of the villain is from their own hubris.
Uh-huh. Totally.
They get what they wanted. They get what they went for. They underestimated what they were trying to get, but they were too proud to give it up.
Yeah.
So all the other alien skeletons morph into one, and it's a fully formed interdimensional being, and asks her what she wants.
It looks like your classic gray alien that you would kind of think of.
And it telepathically asks her what she wants, and she says she wants to know everything. She wants to know it all. And so it stares into her eyes, and it puts so much information in her head that she bursts into flames. Like, her eyes burn out. So she...
It's just kind of too bad, because, like, again, like, it's classic, it's indie, but, it doesn't resonate in the same way.
No, it doesn't resonate in the same way as Donovan taking a sip from the wrong grail.
Like, where he just ages completely and then shatters in the dust, and all that's left is the Nazi pin.
Belloc's head exploding because
falls into an alligator pit because he's just trying to get the rock back, and then it's not
Belloc's head exploding because he opened the Ark. And but it's still it's a fitting end to an indie villain.
Fitting athlete.
It's still classic indie villain death. Which then everything starts getting sucked into a vortex, an interdimensional vortex.
Getting sucked in, and at this point,
Tommy's getting sucked in.
I always was.
Nazis are in 3 out of the 5 movies.
Soviet.
The odd numbers movies. So the odd numbered movies have the Nazis and the fezzes. The even number movies don't have Nazis, don't have fezzes.
But anyway, the commies, they get stuck. They get sucked in. Mac wants to go back because he just wants to find all the treasure.
Because they did go through a treasure room. They did go through a treasure room, very much like the Mummy.
Yes. And he just wants, like, all right, I'll take this back. Pay off my debts. Be fine. And obviously everyone else that's in the chamber realizes getting sucked out, and Indy's like, oh, we can't stay here.
Yeah, so they go running out. They escape. Mac ends up getting sucked into the vortex.
Again, this is where it's very Last Crusade-ish.
Yeah,
with the duty.
Yep.
Where she's, he could have been saved.
Yeah, Indy tries to save him, but he doesn't want to let go of the treasure.
Yep.
And he ends up getting sucked into the vortex because he won't let go.
And, just like the duty, Elsa, she had to still try to go get the grail, and you couldn't hang on. Well, she's still falling, I think.
Yeah, it didn't look like there was a bottom of that pit.
I mean, she's totally, just her skeleton now, but her bone is still falling.
Yep.
I don't know where Mac's body is. He's some other dimension, unless he could disintegrate it.
Now we don't know. We don't know if everybody died when they went through that vortex.
Yeah,
they could have
went through the vortex,
or popped into another dimension, and they're living there, happily now. We don't know.
Kate Blanchett isn't.
Yeah, she got fried from the inside out. But everybody else, I mean, they could,
dimension might be
just
awesome.
Fine. It might be.
That dimension might be filled with goldfish.
It might be.
Pepperidge Farm goldfish.
Yes. Way better than ramen noodles.
It might be the island. They got sucked to the island.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
And then maybe that's not better. I don't know.
If it's the island after Hurley took over, then it's just a party.
It's a party. Or, Could be, they get sucked into the hills of eyes. I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, they got sucked into some dimension that we don't know where they ended up. But yeah, so our heroes escaped in the nick of time, and they're all sitting on top of the ruins of, the area.
Mac has his full mental capacity again. Not Mac.
Yeah, Ox. Yes, Ox has his full. As soon as the skull was returned, Ox got his full mental capacity back again. He's not crazy anymore.
Speak again. He's not nuts. And he can communicate.
So they watch this ship take off and disappear into this other dimension. And so then we have this fun little scene when they're all on top of these ruins. And Mutt wants to leave, but they're telling him, we got to stay here and camp out. We don't want to go traipsing through the jungle in the middle of the night. And it's when Indy calls him Junior. Indy calls Mutt Junior in a nice callback to Henry Jones Sr. Junior! And then this word is revealed to Ox that Indy is Mutt's dad.
Yes.
And that Mutt's actual name is Henry Jones III. Mm-hmm. Well, that might have been revealed earlier when Indy found out. But yeah, Mutt's name is Henry Jones III. And so Indy calls him Junior, just like his dad called him.
Oh, and by the way, during all this, we realized, Miriam, after Indy and her kind of broke up when she was pregnant, she ended up marrying another friend of Indy.
Another friend of Indy's, who was the one who was believed all this time to be Mutt's father. Even Mutt thought that he was his father. Yeah. Mutt didn't find out that Indy was his dad until they were in the truck chase. So then we have a nice short scene of Indy and Marion getting married.
Yeah.
Their wedding.
Beautiful.
Afterwards, the wind blows the door open and blows Indy's hat off of the hat rack and right up to Mutt's feet. This is where you get the tease that Shia LaBeouf might be taking over the franchise. Because he picks up the hat, goes to put it on his head, and Indy walks by, grabs the hat out of his hands, and puts it on. And Indy and Marion walk out of the church as the Raiders March starts playing.
Wondering, okay, will he take up the mantle or not?
Yeah.
Right? Because that was the whole rumor ahead of time, and then they play well with it in the scene. I think I like how they go ahead and play it that way. Where
it was a nice scene. It was a nice ending scene to the movie.
It's a nice ending. It's a very nice ending to it. Again, the movie has a lot of good merits.
Yeah, it just also has a lot of glaring mistakes. But yeah.
So that's Crystal Skull. I know there's a lot of buried opinion, and if you want to tell us yourself if you've seen all four, and especially if, you kind of grew up with the first three and then saw Crystal Skull, your own opinion.
Yeah. Let us know
on this.
Let us know what you think.
Especially if you think, if we're wrong and nuking the fridge was really the worst part of the movie, you can tell us that.
Yeah.
That's your opinion. That's fine.
We'd love to hear.
You're wrong.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your opinion.
Or if there's something else that you thought was actually the worst scene in this movie.
And if you think this is the best Indiana Jones movie, we want to hear that too. We want to hear what you think. It's just because it's my least favorite Indiana Jones movie does not mean that it's necessarily a bad movie, in my opinion. I love it. It's Indiana Jones. There will not be an Indiana Jones movie, at least not one with Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, that I won't love because it's Indy. Just like Star Wars. There's not going to be a Star Wars movie that I don't love because it's Star Wars.
One of the things I liked about it, at least, and it's funny, Harrison Ford's had a long career, and, he had a good 90s, but then, kind of after the 90s, he kind of didn't have as many hits and was just kind of coasting along, and he had this. It was a big, it was a decent enough hit, but it was Harrison Ford being Harrison Ford, and I think the movie allows enough opportunities for him to be Indian in this movie, and the movie is strongest where it's just Indy being Indy.
Yeah. Then it also inspired a classic South Park episode.
Yeah. It did.
But yeah, you get Indy being Indy.
We should definitely do the South Park movie at one point.
Yeah, we probably should.
We should do bigger, longer, uncut.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
But yeah, so you get classic Indy stuff in it. You get some, Indy for a newer age kind of stuff in it. deep down, like at the heart of it, it's a classic indie adventure. It's got all the staples of an indie movie. It fails in
relying too much on CGI.
Yeah, and too much on nostalgia.
And it doesn't deliver the good villains that you need.
Yeah.
At least that's my opinion. People can disagree. I just think that, again, we talked about it earlier, is like some of these really great actors and doesn't utilize them well enough to keep them.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, maybe the villains don't need to change at all, like the writing of the villains. Maybe they just pick the wrong actors to play them. Maybe pick some people that aren't such high caliber actors. Pick somebody who's, a mediocre actor that, a character like this would really show them shining. Yeah. Really be able to allow them to act to the best of their abilities. Rather than these Oscar-winning actors and actresses that can do so much better than the way that these characters are written.
They didn't fit with, they were memorable, but not memorable the way in that movie, though.
Yeah.
Because they just stick out as being, it's Kate Blanchett. And it's like, you get it's Harrison Ford, but it's like, but Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the thing about Harrison Ford is, like, you can see him in some other movies, like, okay, well, it's The Fugitive or Air Force One, that's fine. Right? But, within this movie, like, he's Harrison Ford. It's fine. And it's fine, like, even like Shia LaBeouf, like, he's fine enough as well. You don't want him to assume the mantle of being Indiana Jones. But I think overall,
he did well in the movie.
He's actually okay in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, the scene with him swinging from vines is ridiculous. But overall, the character is probably overwritten, too stereotypical, but, like, he's fine in it. Like, I enjoy the first few Transformer movies, and he's fine in those. I don't have a problem with it. Like, at the time,
he's not a bad actor. He's had some personal stuff going on that.
I would say at the time, I had some issues with him as kind of a person.
Yeah.
He's changed since then. That's fine, whatever. But he's fine enough in the role. It's, again, a classic greaser. So, like, it's not like he's a super interesting character.
Yeah.
Which maybe that's not him. It's just they wrote him to be a classic 50s greaser. Okay. He didn't have a lot to work with. As opposed to, like, they wrote Henry Jones Sr. to, just to be Indy's dad and just let Sean Connery work his charm.
Yeah. Just let Connery be Connery.
To fill in the rest. Because, you have, for one movie, his dad comes in, the other movie, his son comes in. Yeah, Shia LaBeouf, I'm not going to throw anything at him.
No, he did well in the movie. He was,
It's interesting because he had the Transformer series, right? Then around the first one, right, even before the first one, went with Disturbia. Was probably the first time I saw him in the movie.
Yeah.
Of a modern remake of Rear Window. Anyway, he had that series, and then he got cast here, and people thought, maybe they're going to maneuver that way, and that'll be his series. And also, and it's funny, he went a very independent route after that.
Yeah.
Like, his career went a completely different trajectory than I would have ever
thought. Then, a few years later, he showed up in Fury. He was in another mainstream movie or two.
Yeah, he's done some mainstream stuff.
But he's been going a lot more of the independent film side of things.
But, it's just, I think that's one of the things looking back at it. It's just like, I remember that talk, like, will he replace? And obviously it didn't happen.
And it's for the better that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because if there were somebody who would be replacing Harrison Ford in the Indiana Jones movies, there are better choices than Shia LaBeouf.
Absolutely. I think, so now he's probably glad that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So... Anyway, any closing remarks about it?
I don't think so. I think, again, just get back to it. Watching it again, I was able to have a better appreciation for it and understanding that, it really does hit a lot of the classic indie stuff. And I was able to watch it and appreciate that aspect of it. If I have to go to the bathroom when there's monkeys or CGI ants, I can do that. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's
enough of the version doesn't need to be classic, and I think we sometimes need every installment to be terrific, and we don't. No, it doesn't have to be that way. So
yeah, like I said, every time I watch it, I like it a little bit more than the last time I watched it, just because it's got all the elements of a classic Indiana Jones movie. It's an adventure.
Right. And here's the thing: our next one's going to be Dial of Destiny, and it has me ready enough to be able to watch that again and be able to talk about it. So
yeah,
so yeah, as long as it keeps you invested in the character, the main character, which is Indiana Jones, and it does that, it succeeds in that. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. So yeah, join us next week for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the fifth and so far final Indiana Jones movie.
So far.
So yeah, we'll see you then.